Hello everyone, welcome to our Pom Pom Cacti and Pots craft class. Today we'll be making this really cool creation together. My name is Miss M and I am from Young at Art. And before we get started, let's go ahead and make sure we have all of our materials. So be sure you have your darker green yarn, your lighter green yarn, your pink yarn, your 3 toothpicks, and if one of them accidentally broke, I will let you know how to continue with the craft. Your styrofoam ball and your terracotta pot, that really pretty brownish orange color, very natural. So that your terracotta pot, and then a pair of scissors. So for this craft, we are going to start with our dark green yarn. So I'm just gonna move everything else out of the way so you can see everything a little bit easier. Keep this over here to the right. Super easy on how to start creating those pom-pom shapes. What you're gonna do is you're gonna find an end, or one of the ends to your yarn. It doesn't matter which one, just an end. Once you're done finding the end to your dark green piece of yarn, you're going to have your hand out like this. So your thumb is in, you have your 4 fingers. And this is my left hand, but you're welcome to use your right hand or your left hand, whichever one is easier for you to kind of maneuver. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to be using my right hand to go around my, my left 4 fingers. So I'm going to use my left hand to wrap the yarn around. I'm going to use my right hand to go around it because I am right-handed. But again, if you're left-handed, if you wanted to switch, if that makes it easier for you, whatever you feel more comfortable with. So again, my dark green yarn, this is my left hand. I'm going to line up the bottom of this yarn with my pinky. And with my right hand, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to start just unraveling that darker yarn and go round and round like so. Just make sure it looks nice and neat. I don't want to go too far out on either side. I don't want it to get too thick with the width of the yarn around my fingers. Again, it's okay if you overlap a little bit here and there. Make sure it's just nice and neat around your 4 fingers. Don't get too thick with the yarn. I'm trying not to go too thick in this area. You can always kind of scoot it in. Just keep on unraveling. And you just pretty much keep going till it's done. It's going to get pretty thick on there. And the yarn doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but you do want to kind of scoot it around if it's getting a little bit messy and a little bit kind of getting your yarn a little bit too diagonal. You want to kind of make sure it's pretty straight. And it doesn't matter where it ends, if it's in the back or in the front. Just be sure you've gone all the way around with your yarn and your 4 fingers. Perfect. Once you're done, you do want to have a good long piece, I would say, compared to my terracotta pot. Maybe twice the length of your terracotta pot is the amount we're going to cut off here in a second. So here's 1. I'm going to mark it with my finger. And here's 2. So be sure you have at least 2 lengths of your terracotta pot, and you're just gonna cut off that amount. So again, it's about 2, maybe a little bit more than 2, just in case. But if you just did 2, you should absolutely be fine. Oop, make sure nothing's rolling around. So I have my darker yarn raveled around my finger, and then I have the piece I cut off with my scissors. Once you're done, you can very carefully take off the yarn around your fingers. Be sure not to unravel it. And I'm going to turn this piece more horizontal and just lay that loop, and again you can see the yarn vertical like this, and then the piece we cut off is horizontal, and I laid it on the back part, so it's right behind my yarn, right in the middle. And all I'm going to do is tie it in the middle. And when I tie it, I want to make sure the knot's in the middle center. I'm going to tie it really tight. So there's one. Just be sure to don't do it too tight to where your yarn breaks. And not only do I tie it once, but I'm going to do it 2 more times, and I'm just going to create a loop. Oops, excuse me, and go through it. So this is twice. I'm going to pull on it again in the middle. So I've tied it once, I've tied it twice, and then I'm going to make another loop and go through it. This is the 3rd loop. Again, I want to make sure it's nice and tight. I've tied it 3 times, like so. Again, that piece of yarn that was horizontal is now tied up front 3 times. So this is the tie. This is just the end of my yarn. I can cut off that extra to make sure it's pretty lined up with either the bottom, or if it was landing on top, you can trim that one piece so it's not going out too much further than your loops. Once you're done, you'll see your loop on top, so you can pretty much put your finger in it, the loop on top, and then you'll see the loop on the bottom, and you can kind of put your finger through that too. So we're going to start with the top part. I'm going to do my best to loop my finger all the way through from the right to the left, or the left to the right. I'm going to make sure I create that hole, because with my scissors, I'm going to go through that top hole all the way through, so I can go from one to the other. And then I'm just going to use my scissors to cut. And if your scissors aren't strong enough to cut all the way through, just do little by little. So you can just kind of do this part, then this part, and then this part. So if you're having a hard time going all the way through the loop, just do little by little all the way through. So you want to make sure all the loops on top have been cut through. You can always double check. I missed this one, so you can kind of go through it. So if you wanted to kind of see if there's any loops on top that you missed, you can open up the top and kind of see if there's any loops that you need to go through. Once you're done, you can turn it the other direction. I can bring my tie down so it doesn't get in the way. Then find the loop for the bottom half. Now you've turned it the other way. And again, I'm going to use my fingers to kind of go through it to help me find the loop that I'm going to cut through. And again, you can do it little by little, or go all the way through, whatever works best for your scissors. I'm cutting on that top part. There we go. I want to make sure I got all the loops. I can always go back and double check. Make sure there's no loops left in there. Perfect. Oh, I think I see one loop. Another one. Perfect. There's my knot in the middle still, so there's my top and my bottom half. I'm going to trim this little piece right here that's coming out a lot in this piece too. Make sure it's pretty round. And we are going to trim this a lot. So we are going to trim this a lot. But before we do, we're going to do the same thing to our other 2 pom-pom balls. in our yarn. So once you're done, you can go ahead and just kind of put it to the side and grab your light green yarn. Same old, we're gonna take our hand, and if you're right-handed, I would suggest using your left hand to wrap around and your right hand to actually do the wrapping. So I'm gonna line it up to the bottom and just keep going until your yarn's all done. And it'll be the same process all over again for this one. Be sure you're not going out too wide. Be sure your yarn looks pretty nice and clean, not too tied up. Be sure it doesn't go out too thick. Take your time wrapping, but remember we want to cut off about 2 lengths of our terracotta pot. Right there, right there. Can be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. Not a big deal. Oh, excuse me. So I wrapped it around, cut off 2 lengths of the terracotta, put this aside right here. And then I'm going to turn this piece horizontal. And then I'm going to lay my green in the middle with the loops to the left and to the right. Ooh, excuse me. And I'm going to tie it 3 times. Just going in there in the middle and tying. Find the center. There's 1 tie. There's 2. And as you can see, it's in the center. And then 1 more time for the 3rd tie. Again, if there's any extra pieces of string on the ends, you can always cut them off to make sure they're pretty lined up with the rest of the yarn. So wrapped it around, cut off 2 lengths of the terracotta, laid that 1 piece of yarn horizontal, laid this piece on top with a loop on the left and the loop on the right, tied it 3 times in the center, cut off any extra that was really long, and now I'm going to put my pointy finger through the top loop again. Make sure that it's easier to find where to cut. And I'm just going to cutting off the top again. You can do little by little bit or all the way through. Find any loops in there that you might have missed. They're on that top half. Oh, put these over. Then once you're done checking, making sure the top half has no loops, you can turn it the other way. I'm going to use my pointy finger again, either one. Go all the way through. I'm going to cut it at the top again. Oh, I missed a bunch right here. Sure, no loops. And then once you're done, you can put this one aside. And then you can start doing the same thing with the pink one. And the pink one, there's definitely less yarn because our pink flower is definitely much smaller than our cacti. same idea, but this time we're going to have 3 fingers instead of 4 because this one's going to be smaller. So the only difference right now is that our pink yarn is shorter, and instead of 4 fingers to wrap around, we're going to use 3 fingers. Let me do these 3. Actually, I'm trying to see. Maybe since it might be just easier for us to hold our fingers, let's do 2 fingers instead of 3. So change your plan. Let's do 2 fingers instead of 3 because sometimes it can just be harder, and it's okay if our flower is a little bit smaller. We can always cut off a little bit less. So let's do a little change of plan, and instead of 3 fingers, let's do 2 fingers. But again, line it up to the bottom, and then just kind of wrap it around and keep going until your yarn is done. I think that it's just going to be easier to hold and wrap around. And be sure not to go too thick with it. She looks nice and neat. Perfect. So 2 fingers. I'm still wrapping it with my dominant hand. Perfect. And once you're done, I'm going to have you cut off 1 length of the terracotta. So about 1 length. So 2 fingers, 1 length. It's pretty much halving our recipe from before. It's okay, it's a little bit longer. Put my pot aside. And then I'm going to take this piece of yarn, turn it horizontal, take my loop off, and then the loop is on the left side and the right side. I'm going to do my best to hold it and tie it in the middle. This might be a little bit harder to hold, but you just want to hold it very carefully and tie it. Let's tie it 3 times again, just in case. Again, this is going to be a smaller piece, so it's going to maybe be a little bit harder to tie, but it's okay. Just take your time. You can push down on the pink yarn just a little bit so it doesn't move as much. There's 2 ties. There's 3. That's right in the middle. Anything that looks a little bit too much, you can always cut off. So this is a loop, but it's still a little bit too big. So I'm just going to cut off the extra just so it's pretty comparable to the other ones. It's going to be cut later anyways, but just want to make sure it doesn't stick out too much. And same with this, the one that I tied. I'm going to trim it a little bit before I go through the top and the bottom and cut through the loops. So 2 fingers, go, 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 all the way around. Cut off the length of the terracotta pot. Put your yarn that you cut off horizontal. Lay this one in the middle with a loop on the left and on the right. We tied a knot again 3 times in the middle. And then this is a pretty tiny hole. I'm going to have a hard time putting my finger through there. So I'm just going to use my scissors as a guide, take me all the way through. But if you can fit your pinky in there, that might not be a bad idea. But if you can't, not a big deal. And double check, make sure you don't have any loops. Have that loop right there on the top half, that loop right there. Make sure there's no loops. And same on the other half. Just see if I can clean it up. And if that yarn that you tied it with moves, you can always move it where you need it to be. So I'm just kind of adjusting it so it doesn't slide down too much. I'm going to slowly just go through that loop with my scissors. But if you can put your pinky in there first to kind of find the loop a little bit easier, that's great. But if not, just use your scissors as a guide to go all the way through the loops And again, double check. Make sure there's no loops. They're not. Cut. And we have these 3 funny pom-pom shapes. And I've noticed that the more I cut them closer to the center, the more form I got. So the less I cut, a little bit more messy and wild they are. That's totally fine. But the more I cut in, the more I was able to form what shape I wanted my cacti to be. So that's what we're going to do next, is form our cacti by kind of using our scissors to cut the extra yarn that we don't want. So for now, I'm just going to put these aside and just concentrate on my green piece of yarn and my scissors. So with the knot that I tied, it's right here in the center, and again, it's kind of going horizontal, so do your best to find that tie. And I'm going to pretty much hold it in the middle for the most part as I adjust it, but I'm really going to come in and trim up this piece of pom-pom. And this one does look a little bit longer, so I am going to cut a lot off the sides, the left and the right side. But again, that yarn is right there in the middle, and it's going horizontal. I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to just cut a bunch of it off on the sides first. So on the right side, I'll start really trimming it down. And think about, you know, the shape that you're wanting. So really come in there on the sides. Make sure you're cutting nice and clean, and trim up the right side a lot. And you can't go wrong. You just want to make sure that you don't not cut enough off, because you want to get some kind of shape. You can always cut more if you need to. Just take your time. Just trim up the sides little by little. So this is the right side. It's kind of coming in, and you'll see where the center is on mine. Once I'm done trimming some from the right side, I am going to turn it. So again, my piece of yarn that I tied is going horizontal side to side. And I'm going to do the same thing to this side. So now I've just kind of flipped it over, and I'm right-handed again, so it makes it easier for me to cut with my right hand. And I'm cutting off from the right side. You can start kind of coming in from the top a little bit, from the bottom a little bit, as you kind of find the shape you want for your cacti, or for your cactus, yeah. And they're pretty even on the left and the right. You want to make sure that they're pretty even on the left side and on the right side. Get any pieces that might be a little bit extra fluffy. You can kind of start trimming the top and the bottom again. And at this point, you're like, oh, I don't even know what my cactus looks like. So if you are wanting to kind of open it up and kind of get a good feel for it, of how it would be like once it is a pom-pom, just go in there and look at the shape. And ours still looks really fluffy, so I do want to maybe go in there and trim it up even more now that it's a little bit more open. So again, I want to kind of concentrate on the right side and the left side, so it's a little bit more vertical, so I'm coming in more. These are really fluffy, and they take longer to trim than you would think. But once I trimmed in, I'm going to fluff it up and then trim it again to get more of a feel of what shape I want. And remember, the more I cut, the more it forms, so the more you'll get your shape back. You can even kind of turn it too, so you can make sure all the way around it's nicely trimmed, pretty even all the way around. can always just open up the fluffs just by messing with them. But it does take a while. Don't feel like it has to be perfect after 2 minutes, because it definitely took me a while for the first one to get a nice shape. Again, that tied piece is right here. The more that I cut, the more I feel like it's getting a nice shape. Again, if you want yours to be a little bit fluffier, that's fine too. But it's just going to give you more of a nice long cactus shape if you trim it more. Cutting off the sides. Slowly but surely it's getting there, right? You can kind of see the form a little bit more and more as you cut. Just be very careful not to cut too much into the center, because you don't want to cut that horizontal piece of yarn that we used to tie it with. And you can truly keep going as much as you want. And then I'll be doing the same thing to my other one, but my other yarn is a little bit more round. So I just want to make sure I'm cutting all the way around a little bit more, rather than concentrating on the left side and the right side more. I'll be just kind of cutting all the way around to make sure it's a nice round form. This will be my longer cacti on the right, or my longer cactus on the right. Again, you can always fluff it out to see what needs to be cut a little bit more. Our project does not have rocks in it, but if you see any rocks outside, you can always build some on top. That'll help the styrofoam be seen less too. But the styrofoam piece does drop down, so it does sit in the pot nicely. But you can always lay some rocks on top if you have any like pebbles or small pieces of rocks. Just be sure to wash and let them dry, and then you can just kind of sprinkle them on top once you're done with the project. All right, put this aside for now. I'm going to get all the scraps put away, and then I'll start on the lighter green one. Again, if you're still working on it, no problem. Just be sure it has a nice longer shape. Then you can move on to your light green. Again, I'm going to find the center. I'm going to make sure it's nice and horizontal. And I'm going to hold it, and I'm just going to start going all the way around. So I'm not just cutting on the right side now. I'm just kind of turning it. So this one's a little bit more of a round piece. And remember, the more towards the middle you go, the more and tighter the form is, so you won't have all those like scraggly pieces. And be careful not to cut that piece of yarn that we tied everything together with. I'm just going to keep on going around maybe 3 or 4 times, and then I'll open it up to kind of see what the shape looks like. And if you see any loops, you can go in there and cut them too. You're still fine. If you accidentally find a loop, just go ahead and give it a cut. Open it up. See, it's super fluffy still, right? So you can, once you open it up, you can kind of go in there a little bit more and trim it. And we'll have the same idea with our flower, where we just want to cut round and round to create a nice round flower. So we'll constantly be moving our pom-pom shape round. And once we place everything in our pots, you can also trim up the shape a little bit more once you have everything in your pot, and you can kind of see how everything is laid out in there as well. Fluff it out so you can see any long pieces of yarn sticking out. Again, I'm just kind of turning it, cleaning it up. Make sure both sides are nice and clean. And all the way around is nice and clean too. You can always like lay them side by side too, to kind of give yourself a good feel for how they're gonna look together. Maybe get this one a little bit shorter. All the way around. All this mess out of the way as well. Again, I can kind of compare them or see how they look together side by side as well. So you want a longer one and a more round one. And when we put them in that styrofoam sphere shape, you can always like tilt them a little bit more too and just kind of get them nice and cute in there. Put these two aside. Be careful of any extra pieces. Make sure your station's nice and clean so it doesn't pick up any of the other yarn shapes. And then same with this one. This one's going to be super similar to this one, but it's going to be nice and small and compact. Find that piece of yarn that I tied with. Here it is, side to side. I'm going to hold it and go all the way around. Be careful not to cut in too close. And be sure that you're turning your shape so you get all the sides. I go around about 4 or 5 times, and then I can open it up and clean it up a little bit more. And this one does go in our darker green one, so you can always just kind of set it on there to see how the size compares to your darker green shape. I'll open it up a little bit. I feel like it's still too big, so I'm going to fluff it up and trim it down a lot. Again, I'm turning it a lot, so I get a nice round shape all the way around. Be careful of that center. You don't want to get too close in there. So it's a nice little round pom-pom shape. Compare, it's still a little bit too big. That looks so cute. Really cute. Maybe just a little bit more, and then I can start putting in my shapes into the styrofoam ball. Alright, and then once you are done with your shapes, again, double check, make sure everything looks nice and cute together. You are going to grab your styrofoam ball. If you're still cutting away, you are totally fine. But you're going to grab your styrofoam ball. I'm going to put this shape out so you guys can see it a little bit better. And you are going to grab one of your 3 toothpicks. And again, I'll show you in a moment if one of them accidentally breaks. You're going to take the bottom of your dark green cacti, and in the center bottom, just kind of place the toothpick in there. So the bottom center, be sure you still have a good almost inch or about an inch or so sticking out, because that's going to go into your styrofoam ball. So the bottom of that darker green shape, just take the toothpick, be sure you have a good inch or so sticking out from the bottom, and then you place it very carefully inside of the styrofoam ball. And just be sure it's not wobbly, it's not going anywhere. And at this point, if you want to trim it down, you're welcome to start like kind of trimming it. You're like, okay, now I can see a little bit better on how the shape is going to be on that styrofoam. You're welcome to do one last little trim before you add anything around it. You can take your time. With the second one, I'm going to show you how to put it in, and then I'm going to also show you what happens if you accidentally break one of your toothpicks, because it's just something that happens. They're pretty, light, and they do break sometimes. So once you're done placing your first darker green cacti in there, and you can even like form it with your hand a little bit too by just kind of pushing down on the sides, rounding out the top. You're going to take your second piece, and same thing, like on the bottom part. So this is my wrap right here. I'm just going to take the toothpick, put on through the bottom. You might have a little bit more on this one because this one's a little bit shorter. And then you're going to place it exactly where you want that one to be. And I'm just going to push down. Be careful not to poke yourself, especially since this one's a little bit shorter. Maybe just hold on to the sides of the toothpick as you push down. And again, same thing. Now that we have it down, if you wanted to kind of trim the sides, just be careful for your toothpick. You can always push down the toothpick a little bit more if you need to. You can get those two shapes a little bit more how you want them. You can have a little bit more straight. Oh, let me try this again. You can have your toothpick a little bit more straight if you want to, but again, you can pretty much form it on that sphere however you want the shape to be. Let's say that your toothpick accidentally breaks. Not a problem. Just take one of the sides and just kind of poke it through. And just be sure you still have a little bit showing. And just do your best to push down on it the best you can. So again, if it breaks through, not a problem. Just kind of stick the broken piece, same area at the bottom, and then just kind of push down on it. It's totally fine if it breaks. Either way, it works. So this is my broken piece right here. I'll just put it off to the side. And again, if you want to trim those two shapes, I can even do a little spot check by seeing how it would look. And it's pretty much on the top part of my sphere shape. Like I said, later on you can add like rocks and stuff to kind of hide the shape a little bit more. You can always floof it out. You can like even trim it while it's in here. And then once you're done, same thing with the pink flower. So this is my tie right here. I'm going to stick my toothpick on the very bottom part. Oops, some of it came out. Oops, it's okay. And then I'm going to, maybe have it tilted directly on top, and just kind of push down. You can push down on the sides of the toothpick if it's easier to push down. And then, voila. So cute. And again, you want to trim the pink a bit too. Just kind of make it work in your shape. And this isn't something that you mess with a lot, so if it kind of feels fragile, that's totally fine. It's a decorative piece. It's something that's going to be touched a lot, so you can just make it exactly how you want. These are so cute. And you can have some kind of coming over the sides if you want to, or if you want to trim it up. But truly at this point, it's up to you how you want the shapes to be. I would just suggest having the larger, darker green one on the right and the lighter green one on the left side. And then your cute flower anywhere that you want on top of the darker green one. These are so cute. And the back of it, I am holding the back. Ooh, my ball rolled away. I should probably try that again. So I'm going to take that pokey piece just to make sure it's not moving around. There we go. I'm going to show you guys the back part too of the pot. So you are going to be seeing that as I hold it. But as it sits in the pot, like, you won't be able to see those areas as much. Again, I want to make sure that green one is sturdy now that it kind of rolled off. Perfect. Make sure all pieces are nice and sturdy. I'm just going to turn it upside down and hold a sphere shape and make sure nothing's coming off. Move all these pieces out of the way so you can see everything a little bit better. Let me show you how it kind of looks like without the pot. Sorry, my little pieces of yarn are kind of everywhere. Again, I would probably turn it upside down, make sure it's nice and sturdy. Then place it in the pot and hold the sphere down, make sure it's nice and sturdy. And there you go. Thank you so much, artists, for joining us. If you're still trimming, not a problem. Be sure you get your shapes nice and neat, and be sure that your shapes are not going in anywhere. They're nice and tight in that styrofoam piece. Thank you so much again, and I hope you have a great day.